Hello fellow bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I am Marissa, and today I am here with my December reading wrap-up. So in the month of December, I read 4 books, some of which were amazing and probably should have been put on my best of 2018 list. But I always feel weird about putting books that I've just finished on the best of the year list. I feel like I haven't had enough time to let them settle and properly reflect on them. Anyway, it was a pretty good reading month, so without further ado, here is what I read. First book I finished in the month of December was Calypso by David Sedaris. I listened to this one on audiobook while driving to work. It was phenomenal, and I highly recommend it on audiobook as David Sedaris narrates the stories himself. In fact, this might be my favorite David Sedaris book so far. He shares personal, comedic stories about rather serious subjects of family ties, aging, health matters, and loss of loved ones. It could be bleak stuff, but in classic Sedaris fashion, he ties his own personal brand of humor and topics like his family's retail therapy, phrases drivers use to curse at each other in other languages, a turtle with a tumor, and the Fitbit's reign of terror, and so on. David Sedaris has the miraculous talent of taking the ordinary out of context and transforming it into something altogether refreshing. If you've never read David Sedaris, there's no time like now to start. This collection is stunning, dark, and yet as funny as ever. I also read 3 Things About Elsie by Joanna this month. This book was brilliant. I read the opening 2 pages in the library and I was hooked. The book opens with Florence, an 84-year-old who has fallen down in her apartment in the Cherry Tree Home for the Elderly. She is waiting on the floor to be found, and she thinks about who will find her and what will happen when the ambulance arrives. She also thinks about a dark secret from her past and whether she'll ever have the chance to share it. Florence has had a lot on her mind lately. The home's director, Miss Ambrose, has warned Florence that she may need to be relocated to a more supervised facility because Florence seems to be deteriorating mentally. Florence misplaces and forgets things frequently. She swears that her elephant figurine has been moved by someone besides herself, and that a new resident at the home looks exactly like a man she knew in the past, only that man has been dead for 60 years. No one believes her except for her lifelong best friend, Elsie, and their friend, Jack. Do we, as the reader, believe her, or is she simply an elderly woman suffering from dementia? It's a treat to spend the entire book answering those 2 questions. I was impressed by Joanna writing. She doesn't use fancy prose or beautiful language, but she manages to infuse her characters with such intriguing psychological depth. And not just the residents at the home, but the caretakers at the facility are given this depth and attention in Cannon's writing as well. I do have to say that I guessed one of the major plot points and twists of this book fairly early on, but I don't think that it detracted from my reading experience. It was revealed so late in the book that I thought I might have been incorrect, so it was all the more rewarding and emotional when Cannon finally divulged the twist. This book is about aging, memory, and loss, but at its core, it's also about the ways in which our ordinary choices can impact others in the most unexpected of ways. Florence observes that even though she lives at Cherry Tree Home, there is not one cherry tree on the property. She says, "It's the kind of name you give to these places, though. Woodlands, Oak Court, Pine Lodge. They're often named after trees for some reason. It's the same with mental health units. Forests full of forgotten people waiting to be found again." And this book is all about those forests of forgotten people, discarded little moments and buried stories that filter in through the cracks and make all the difference. I thought it was a great book, and I raved about it so much that my mom is reading it right now. I almost put it on my best of 2018 list, but since I was just finishing it while making the list, I was worried that I hadn't had enough time to let it sit with me. It's certainly up there, though, with the best books that I read this year, and it is a great read for those who like books such as A Man Called Ova or The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. Next, I read Howard's End by E.M. Forster this month as a buddy read with Petra. I absolutely loved this book. The second I finished it, I felt like I needed to pick it up again and take notes and write down quotes. It's definitely one that I immensely enjoyed on a first read, and I feel like it would stand up to multiple reads. It follows the Schlegel sisters, Margaret and Helen, 2 cultured bourgeois women of German heritage living in England, and their relationships with both the richer Wilcoxes and the poorer Basts. This book was so interesting to me in that it seemed to tackle many of the same themes that Victorian literature does. It discusses class, respectability, inheritance. The Schlegel sisters occupy this middle ground of class. They are wealthy enough that they don't have to work a day in their lives, but they don't have the ancestry and land to back up their status. They thrive on philosophy and art and buy books and attend the opera, but they rent their home and will be forced to leave when the rent is up. The Wilcoxes have both wealth and property, but they are snobbish and not as accepting or forward-thinking as the Schlegels are. On the other hand, the Basts are lower middle class, aspiring to greater status, but end up sinking further into poverty under the influence of others. It's about the mixing of English classes and the rise of the middle class and how these connections between classes and between people influence societies and individuals. The book explores tensions between urban and more rural life, gender equality, and delves into other economic and philosophical issues of the time. It explores what it means to be English at a time right before World War I changes everything. Forster's writing is engaging and full of wit and sly jokes. He is a master of characterization, and he has some of the most fully fleshed out characters that I've read, on par with Austen, Gaskell, and Dickens's works. Where Forster really shines, though, is his dialogue. His characters have such phenomenal quips and witty banter. I wonder if the creator of Gilmore Girls, Amy Sherman Palladino, is a fan of Forster's work. I feel like her dialogue in Gilmore Girls and in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel seems to be inspired by Forster's type of dialogue and characterization. Margaret is one of my favorite characters of all time. She seemingly knows how to handle any situation, and she is brave and fiercely loyal. She interestingly has progressive ideals, but she also feels the need to stick to convention at times. This was such a great book. I've heard that there's a BBC miniseries for me to check out next. I'd love to know if you've read this book before, what you thought about the book, and if you've watched the miniseries, what you thought about that as well. The last book I read in December was The Sea Prayer by Khaled Hosseini. It is a picture book that I read in one sitting in the library on the last day of December. I almost feel like it's cheating to add a picture book to this list because my experience of reading that book took only 10 minutes, but it certainly is a work of literature, and even though it's tailor-made for children, I still have many thoughts about it and feel like it deserves to be discussed here. I loved Khaled Hosseini's other books that I've read, The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns. This is Hosseini's response to the current refugee crisis and the story of a 3-year-old Syrian boy whose body washed up on the beach in Turkey in September 2015. The year after this boy's death, 4,176 others went missing or have died attempting similar journeys. Hosseini is actually donating proceeds from this book to the UN Refugee Agency and his own foundation to fund global refugee relief efforts. So I was pleased to see online that my taxpayer dollars went to purchasing plenty of these for our county's libraries. I cannot think of a better tribute to a dead 3-year-old than this beautiful, accessible book. It's an epistolary poem, or, like the title says, a prayer, from father to son on the eve of them fleeing their native war-torn country. It's a message from one generation to the next, mourning how children will never fully understand their home country as the previous generation has, but rather see it as a place of chaos and destruction. It illustrates the many reasons that refugees exist and how there are truly no safe options for these fleeing families. The book has beautiful watercolor illustrations that were done by Dan Williams. I actually posted a picture on Instagram recently because I thought they were so beautiful and seamlessly showed the shift in landscape between generations. I think that books like this are important for kids. A book like this is often criticized as too dark, but I think that any subject matter can be made approachable and appropriate for children. I still remember Patricia Polacco's book, Butterfly, from when I was a child. That book is about the Nazi occupation of France, another light and fluffy topic. But when these themes are tailored towards children, they can really have such a wonderful impact. The Sea Prayer story teaches children empathy and tolerance towards others while making them aware of a very real situation that exists in our world today. This book is such a quick and impactful read that it's worth quickly checking out at your local library or bookstore. So that is all I have for you today. What was your favorite book in the month of December? Have you read any of these books that I talked about today, or do you plan on reading any of them? And do books from December usually make it onto your best of 2019 list? I'm just curious. As always, I look forward to seeing you all in another video soon. Bye!